Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Committee on Jobs, Economic Development, and the Economy. And we don't have quorum yet, but if it's okay with folks, we started the subcommittee. Is that okay? Yes. All right. And our Senator Liu, was here first, so if folks don't mind, we'll start with her first. And this is item number 4, SB 1084, California Economic Security Task Force. And the anticipated motion is a due pass to Assembly Human Services Committee. The amendments will be taken in Human Services. But Senator Liu,
thank you
you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members. I first would like to thank you and the committee staff for your work on this bill, and I am pleased to accept the committee amendments now today, if that's okay with you. But this is double referred. The federal poverty guidelines is an income of $10,830 a year for an individual, $22,050 a year for a family of 4. And using that guideline, California's poverty rate is 12.8%, almost 13% of our population. But we all know that even at twice those incomes, people and families can barely survive. Poverty threatens the state's economic health by reducing the tax base, impeding the growth of an educated workforce, and increasing the cost of social services. SB 1084 would establish a task force to create a pathway to economic self-sufficiency for millions of Californians living in poverty. The bipartisan task force would include legislators, representatives of state and local county agencies, businesses, and other key stakeholders. Create an inventory of state poverty and economic development programs, analyze current programs to improve effectiveness, and develop a comprehensive plan with recommendations for maximizing our use of existing dollars to improve economic self-sufficiency among California's population, 50% improvement by 2020. This legislation is sponsored by the County Welfare Directors Association, the Insight Center for Community and Economic Development, the Western Center of Law and Poverty, and the Women's Foundation of California. I have witnesses here to testify in support of the bill and answer questions that you may have.
Before we continue, Senator, I think we have quorum. If we can call the roll.
Manuel Perez.
Here.
Logue. Bell. Bill Berryhill. Block. Salas.
Thank you. Members, or do we have folks here in support? Yes. You can go ahead and present a couple of minutes each.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of SB 1084. My name is Jenny Chung, and I'm an attorney with the Insight Center for Community Economic Development. The Insight Center is a national California-based organization dedicated to helping people and communities become and remain economically secure, and also a proud sponsor of SB 1084. Poverty threatens California's economy today and into the future. The costs of poverty to our economy are pervasive and associated with poor health, increased crime, reduced labor market participation, all of which hinder California's economic growth and its competitiveness in the global economy. SB 1084 proposes the public-private statewide partnership that is necessary to support and rebuild California's economy if we are to overcome the recession. SB 1084's 13-member task force would be the first ever statewide bipartisan body to comprehensively link poverty alleviation with workforce development and entrepreneurship, with members representing small and large businesses, the County Welfare Directors Association, and state legislators from the minority and majority parties. SB 1084's task force would address the complex causes and impacts of poverty in our state through 3 key steps. First, the task force would provide an inventory of state poverty reduction and self-sufficiency programs. California invests significant resources in a number of these programs, but has no comprehensive assessment of their impact or connections to one another. The state would be able to use the inventory to maximize program effectiveness and collaboration. Second, the task force would provide specific recommendations that represent the needs of the public and private sectors to move 50% of Californians towards economic security by the year 2020. And last, the task force would work to establish an entity to implement the task force recommendations. As a lifelong Californian, I urge you to make decisions today that will create a strong California for the future. Thank you for your time today, and I urge your aye vote.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Chair and members of the community. My name is Tim Reese. I'm Executive Director of the California-Nevada Community Action Partnership. We are the state association of federally designated community action agencies whose goal is to ameliorate the causes and effects of poverty across the country. In California, we represent the interests of 56 CSBG, Community Services Development Block Grant funded agencies that are in every one of your constituencies in California. Our network serves about 4 million low-income Californians. We believe that this bill is about economic development. We know across the country that it is being demonstrated that the creation of jobs and moving people into employment that can support their family is the most effective way to move families out of poverty permanently. We work with a variety of other organizations. The community action agencies at the local level sit on the WIB boards. We work with CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions. We work with other associations, all designed to create economic activity that create jobs and employment in the local community. We believe that the creation of this task force is the best way to focus upon helping low-income Californians have a path toward job creation and self-economic sustainability. Our history of support is very strong. In 2004, we worked with Senator Alarcon and the California Dream Foundation and his goal of reducing poverty 50% and creating a plan to eliminate poverty in California. At that time, CalNEVA as an association contributed $5,000 toward that effort. Since then, we are the key capacity building, training, and technical assistance organization funded through the federal government in California to provide that training to local community action agencies to enhance and build their capacity to serve low-income Californians. We are willing and able to play a key role in supporting the goals of this bill and to helping this become a reality and move towards successful completion of the plans outlined in the bill. We urge your support of this bill and are here to provide assistance to you and the state in achieving the goals of this bill.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else here in support of the measure? State your name, your organization.
Nicole Wortelman on behalf of the Alameda County Board of Supervisors, Ventura County Board of Supervisors, and City and County of San Francisco in support.
Thank you.
Farrah McDade Ting on behalf of the California State Association of Counties in support.
Rebecca Gonzalez, National Association of Social Workers, California Chapter in support.
Martha Flammer, representing the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors in support.
Thank you.
Hannah Hill with the Women's Foundation of California in support.
Good morning. Amber Twitchell, California Human Development, representing migrant seasonal farm workers in rural Northern California in support.
Thank you. Anybody here in opposition of the bill? I'd like to welcome our colleagues, Mr. Marty Block, Ms. Mary Salas, our Vice Chair, Mr. Dan Logue, and Mr. Berryhill. Here in our committee, I'd like to open up for questions or ideas or concerns from committee members. Mary?
Thank
Salas?
you. Senator Liu, I really am supportive of this, and I don't know if there was a motion. I'd like to move the bill. But as I was reading the information last night, it just occurred to me that this is so necessary at this time when we're thinking about strategies on how to move our economy forward. And I think that really what was really striking and telling was on page 4 of the analysis, where it shows where our jobs have been lost, and they've been lost in the manufacturing sector that have created the highest paying jobs, and that they've been replaced by lower wage service sector jobs. So I think that this is a good way for us to look at our strategies for attracting businesses here in the state of California and really defining ourselves as what do we want to do in the future. And relative to our opportunities for a new economy through the renewable energy, the green sector jobs, there's a great deal to be said there. Also, of note is where the healthcare professions and the allied healthcare professions are, is that's a wonderful opportunity to move people out of service sector jobs and into the healthcare field, which is another higher paying job, and we know that that's going to be an area that's going to continue to grow. So I'm supportive of your work. It seems like it's the right thing to do. It's a very common sense approach to doing this, and that it's going to be funded by private corporations rather than the general fund is a plus at this time too.
Thank you, Ms. Salas. Any other comments, Mr. Berryhill?
Well, I regretfully can't support this. We all agree the best social program in the world is to have a job. The way to attack poverty is to create an environment for job creation in the private sector. You know, Ronald Reagan said it so many years ago, government's not the solution, it's the problem. We need to get job growth going again in this state. And as I say that, we continually shoot down bills that are considered job creators for California, and we pass bills that are considered job killers. And we cannot continue to go that direction in California and expect to get people back to work. We've driven out the manufacturing sector with regulatory. We've made it an unlevel playing field with other states. We've lost our competitive edge. Until we get that competitive edge back, we have a great state. We all know that. California is the greatest place in the world to do business, but we can't be so arrogant that we drive business out with over-regulation, over-taxation. That's why we are ranked, I believe it's 51st worst place to do business in the nation. So we've got to address those policies before I think we can start placing people into their jobs and all these other things. So I just think that more government is not the solution in this, and that, quite frankly, job creation and legislation that deals with those kinds of issues are things I can support, but I regretfully have to say I can't support this.
Thank you, Mr. Berryhill. Any other comments? Mr. Logue?
Yeah, excuse me, I appreciate you bringing this bill forward. I won't be able to support it also. It's my understanding that we have 12% of the population in the country, but we have 30% of the welfare cost in the entire nation. What we need to do in California is to quit trying to take care of everybody and help them take care of themselves by creating jobs. And manufacturing is going to be a key component to our future here. We have to quit fighting over a shrinking pie. We have to work together to make the pie bigger. And all this does is creates the problem of the pie shrinking. And now we're beginning to take away from the business community and the working families to support people who basically need jobs more than anything else in the world. So I understand why you're doing this, but there's a reason why we have 30% of the welfare recipients in the entire nation cost here in California. We need to reevaluate that, make our state competitive. Our regulations in California are absolutely killing jobs. This is an exodus, leaving the state, and this bill, I believe, is basically a job-killing bill, and it's going to do more harm to people in poverty than it's going to help them. So I will not support it.
Thank you, Mr. Logue. Would like to address some of the points?
Well,
Senator?
This is a task force to strategically look at what we do here in California to try to build a future economy, not just today, but for tomorrow too. To strategically look at what you call job killer environments, et cetera, to look at what future jobs needs will be for the California, and to make pathways. This is not a government-run task force. It's a task force that's open to businesses, small and large, and government representatives, and it's philanthropy. It's all of the stakeholders together looking at our economic needs and doing something strategic about trying to fulfill those needs in the future. So this is a way for us to have that conversation across the table and to be comprehensive about it. And so I would hope that with that, I would ask for your support of the bill.
Thank you, Senator. Any other comments or thoughts from members? Well, I'd say a few words if that's okay. how do we move folks from poverty to self-sufficiency, I think, is the ultimate question here. How do we move folks from a handout to a hand up, if you will? Part of that has to deal with individual responsibility, right? Part of that has to deal with the fact that the individual needs to have a work ethic of wanting to go further and beyond. Part of it has to deal with the fact that the individual needs to have the motivation to try to figure out how to navigate, to be creative, to be maybe even a risk taker, so that one can move from poverty to self-sufficiency. But we all know that not everyone has an equal playing field. We know that some people may be born perhaps in a context where there is a lack of opportunity and a lack of access. There may be some people born to a family that are millionaires. There may be other individuals that are born to a family that only earn maybe $15,000 a year. And so those type of situations and contexts sometimes require government as well as business to come together as partners to bring about some changes. With that being said, I think it's important that we do think about how we can alleviate poverty by, on one end, ensuring that we create an environment that's conducive to job creation in the state of California and ensure that people have opportunities to good paying jobs. And I do agree with the fact that the greatest tool to alleviate an individual from poverty is by making sure that they have access to a good paying job. A job is very key and very important. And so, for example, in areas perhaps that are under-resourced and in areas where there is blight, folks have come together in the past to create the Enterprise Zone. I think the Enterprise Zone is an example by the creation of an incentive or a credit in which we can lure businesses that can create jobs and also at the same time create revenues for the local economy. That's an example as to how government and business can come together as partners to bring about some real social change and to alleviate that poverty. At the same time, there are government programs such as CalWorks, such as Healthy Families, such as the National Food Lunch Program, that are other avenues of opportunity for people. There needs to be balance, I think, in our approaches. And I do agree with the importance of ensuring that through a task force such as this, we can have a strategy, a comprehensive strategic campaign, if you will, in which, and I say campaign because then we have resources, we have time, we have staff that is concentrating specifically on that issue to deal with it, so that we can move folks out of poverty. Quite frankly, I think it's important that we do an inventory of these programs and to see how they're measuring success and to identify how well they're actually working. And at the same time, why not do an analysis of the state's regional economies and industry clusters? Once again, our state of California is very diverse. What goes on in Calexico perhaps doesn't go on in San Francisco. What goes on in San Jose perhaps doesn't happen in the Central Valley. And so I think that this task force would also do just that, meaning not only an analysis of current social welfare programs that exist, but as well an analysis of the regional economies and the industry clusters that could exist and how we link people to those type of jobs that are there in their region. I think the task force can also do the job of taking a look at structures and how well those structures are actually working or not working. or working in coordination with one another, or not, quite frankly. For example, the employment training panels, or the workforce investment boards, or even our community colleges, or our K through 12 systems. How are we preparing the next workforce? All these issues are critical. And so with that, I appreciate the bill. And I wanted to ask you, Senator, if you're open to co-authors. Because I'd like to be one. I'm not sure of other members. Mr. Marty Block, Ms. Mary Salas. And so with that being said, you might have had your closing already, Senator.
I did. I ask for your support on the bill.
Thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second? Second. Can we go ahead and call the roll?
V. Manuel Perez.
Aye.
Aye. Logue. No. Bell. Bill Berryhill. No. Block. Aye. Salas. Aye. 3-2.
Okay.
Bill is on call.
We're going to put it on call. We'll miss one member. Thank you, Senator. Yes. Yeah. Senator Wright?
How are you? Let me.
Welcome, Mr. Bell.
Let me thank Senator Price for giving me a heads up. I'm going to try to be brief and get out of the way so I can go get GO started. And some of you may have a bill in Senate GO.
No problem, Senator Wright.
My first bill is a resolution, and we're trying to prevail on Congress to maintain the C-17 plant in Southern California. Some of you may recall it originally was a McDonnell Douglas plant. And due to a number of things that were just conditions in California, we helped put McDonnell Douglas out of business. McDonnell Douglas, you may recall, actually tried to sell itself to a Chinese company. The Department of Justice and the Defense Department said that you can't do that because they had so many secrets that they couldn't sell. And then this project was stalled. Fortunately, Boeing stepped up and took over the production of the C-17. It is a short field takeoff and landing airplane. It does exceptional work. We've used it in many wars. We maintain it and we build it right in that plant in Long Beach. If you've never seen one, and I'm going to shut up and get out of the way because there are others here, but there's nothing more, for those of us who are plane people, there's nothing more exciting than watching a C-17, something that big, take off on such a short field, lift up, and to realize that that plane was produced and made and is being made by Californians in California. This bill would simply say we would like the United States to continue manufacturing the plane as they scale back, that it's a vital part of what goes on with the Air Force and in the war effort in moving goods and services. In the first Desert Storm, they actually attempted to use 747s for much of what the C-17 does. C-17 is much more efficient, and it's made in California. And with me, Michael Jackson, the other one, and Jack Stewart. Actually, let me shut up, I'll get in trouble. But and Jack Stewart from the Manufacturers Association.
There's a first, there's a second. Thank you, Senator Wright. We're here discussing SJR 29, aerospace industry. C-17 production, and this is a due pass to the Assembly floor. But you're here in support of the measure?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, and members. Michael Jackson with the Boeing Company. As Senator Wright said, the C-17 facility in Long Beach is the only remaining manufacturing facility in the state of California for aircraft. We have approximately 400 suppliers, 13,000 employees, and $2 billion of economic impact. So if there was ever a piece of legislation that was a job creator, this is certainly one.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Jack Stewart, California Manufacturers and Technology Association. I would just reiterate that I'm here to support the resolution. The fact is that loss of this plant would be the same scale of loss as we suffered with NUMMI last year. We need to keep this plant up and moving. I have passed out a chart here that I think is interesting. And I don't think I've presented it to this committee before, This chart shows the growth of manufacturing facilities, both startups and expansions nationwide. The research is done by Conway Data, an organization that publishes Site Selection Magazine. It's a vertical publication for corporate real estate people. But what they did in this report was they looked at the last 3 years, 07, 08, and 09, for total manufacturing startups and expansions. And then we took those numbers and normalized them for population to look at how many startups and expansions each state is getting per million residents. And if you see where California falls on this list, we're all the way at the bottom. We're getting 1.5% of all new facilities, startups, and expansions in California, while we have almost 12% of the population of the country. And this, again, goes to the fact that we are just not competitive, and we need to do all we can to maintain the manufacturing we have. And in this case, the C-17 facility in Long Beach is just critical to our economics, both for the state and for the local area.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Stewart. Any other folks here in support?
Mr. Chairman, members, Eric Daniels with the California Space Authority, also in support for the reasons already stated. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Thomas Vu with the California Chamber of Commerce in support.
Thank you, sir.
Aubrey Stone, President, CEO, California Black Chamber, definitely in support.
Thank you, sir. Any others here in support? Anyone here in opposition? Any members have any comments? Yes, sir, Mr. Lowe.
Mr. Stewart, you gave us this chart here, and this chart's pretty compelling. This probably defines our state better than anything that I can see in the last 5 years. We're ranked last. Do you think Puerto Rico would be ahead of us if it was a state?
I think it would be ahead of us, yes.
The question that I have is, can you give us, this panel, a couple of reasons why you think we're at the bottom? And manufacturing, and is it not true that manufacturing does more to create wealth and fund our schools and help people in poverty than manufacturing?
Well, certainly manufacturing is one of the sectors of the economy, along with agriculture and mining, that actually creates wealth in the economy and then has a multiplier effect on jobs. Typically, throughout the economy, every manufacturing job equals about 2.5 other jobs, and you see in this case is another example of that exact. In this case, the C-17 is the exact example of that. We have 5,000 jobs in the plant and 13,000 jobs in the community. The reasons, we had in fact, I testified before this committee last year on a manufacturing study that the Milken Institute did for us. And the 3 reasons that California is lacking in manufacturing and not able to attract manufacturing jobs is, 1, the overall image of California as a place to do business. The word is out. And we need to do something to change that opinion. And someone Barry Hill mentioned the CEO magazine, where California was ranked last by over 600 executives, CEOs who participated in that survey. And as a matter of fact, that CEO magazine has been doing that same survey for 6 years, and California has been number 51 for 6 years running. We have a record going here. Also the other reason is the regulatory nature of California, just across the board regulations, environmental, workplace regulations, are all very damaging to California's ability to compete. I think we all have talked about that before, and it's something that I think we need to keep ever foremost in our mind as we're moving forward and looking at new legislation that's going to create additional regulations and additional burdens on manufacturers who would like to manufacture here.
You're saying that if we as a state would quit being so hostile to manufacturing, that we would be able to lift people out of poverty a lot quicker?
I certainly believe that. I mean, when you look at the statistics in California and you see the drop in the number of manufacturing jobs, and then compare that to the average wages in California, you see just a dramatic drop-off. They parallel each other. As manufacturing jobs go down, the middle class disintegrates in California.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Logue. Mr. Stewart. Mr. Berrio.
Yeah, well, just to kind of tag on to that whole line of thinking, that the problem we have in California is there's an uncertainty, and so it makes it very difficult for business to come to California with uncertainty on regulations. And for no fault of your own, you may have built a legitimate business in this state and things are going great, and then the government comes in with ridiculous regulations and puts you out of business. It's very tough to get loans when you have uncertainty with the banks. So we have a lot of work to do to get jobs going again. Let's don't lose good manufacturing jobs. We've lost enough of those already. And let's look at this as a time to start to turn this state around, and let's keep the C-17 being built here, and let's start getting policies in place that will not only keep programs like this here in California, but create programs like this going forward.
Sure.
So,
Thank
very
you, Mr.
supportive.
Other members, Ms. Salas.
Yes, Senator Wright, I thoroughly support your resolution. And as a daughter of a family, there were 7 sons in the family. The grandparents were immigrants, but they entered the military, and after the military, each one of those 7 brothers got a job in the aerospace industry in San Diego County, and that's been restricted now. But what that allowed my family to do is go from a family of farm workers to a family that was supported by good manufacturing jobs, and I was the generation that benefited from that building of wealth. And that's what we want to see in the future, because it's my generation that drew the most benefit from that manufacturing sector, and it's my generation that was the wealthiest as a result of our parents being able to work in those kinds of jobs. And now for the first time, what we're seeing, instead of the next generation building wealth and getting better, is we're actually seeing a decline in their ability to build wealth for themselves in the future. That has to be turned around. And so I really support this. I think that we do have to get back to a manufacturing-based job. Again, Senator Liu's study that she wants to do, it really highlighted exactly what you're saying, Mr. Berryhill and Mr. Logue, that when we're losing that manufacturing base and going to a different kind of economy, it's a shrinking of the middle class. And that's really what's harming the state of California, is a shrinking of the middle class, the creation of more jobs that are service sector, very, very low paying, that are not sustainable for families. And we need to turn that around so that those families that are in unsustainable jobs don't have to seek help from the government. So I applaud your efforts, and I will be supporting your resolution.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis. Any other comments from committee members? I understand. Well, first of all, let me just say I appreciate the resolution, Senator Wright. And I understand that the C-17 has provided work for over 650 suppliers in 44 states. And this resulting in $5.8 billion being added annually to the nation's economy. Now, for the state of California, a shutdown of the production line would have an impact of 13,857 jobs, 384 suppliers, and a statewide economic impact of $2 billion annually. With that being said, obviously this resolution is critical. And the hope is that our President and our Congress and the Department of Defense will take immediate action to protect the national security, as you state here in your resolution, but at the same time, as you state here in your resolution, preserve the crown jewel of the American industrial base. I also understand that this is based in an enterprise zone in Long Beach. Once again, another example as to how the enterprise zones are actually working and creating jobs, or at least retaining jobs. And so there were some other points that were made by members, which I agree. The issue of predictability. In order for us to create a state that is a job creator state, a state in which is looked upon as business friendly, we need to be predictable. The issue of regulation, obviously, is an issue that we can work on, and quite frankly, the issue of capital and loans and credit for our businesses, specifically small businesses in emerging domestic markets. I think all those elements are critical, and quite frankly, a lot of those elements have been brought forth through this committee. And this committee has done, I think, overall, a fairly good job of making sure that we promote and that we continue to implement that type of policy. And I especially appreciate the issue of manufacturing, because we know manufacturing is key for the restoration of our economy, at the same time bringing back the middle class. And we know that these are good paying jobs within manufacturing, and we also know the multiplier effect of manufacturing, which is very critical. So with that being said, there is a first and a second, and Senator Wright, if you'd like to close.
Very briefly, thank you, Mr. Chair and the members of the committee. You'll have another bill hopefully on your floor that deals with regulations from some of the air boards. I think Assemblymember Logue made the motion on that bill the other day. There's often a discussion about higher education and what actually made California. And while higher education is important and you wouldn't want to get rid of it, I love to remind people that California was probably the driver in us winning World War II. Whether or not there were Liberty ships that were made in Richmond, California, the P-51 Mustang that actually was made in Inglewood, California on what is now Hollywood Park Racetrack, whether or not it was the B-25 Mitchell bomber that took off from an aircraft carrier and bombed Tokyo at the beginning of the war, or whether or not it was the P-38 that was made at Lockheed in Burbank, where they made the first tricycle landing gear aircraft because people had to learn how to fly with a yoke because you could drive it like a car. Whether it was the DC-3 that was the workhorse engine that ferried cargo back and forth around the war. All of those pieces of equipment were manufactured in California. And when you begin to go back and look, there's an old saying that we have in South Central LA, that when the producer names the tune, the consumers got to dance. The object of the exercise is that you really want to maintain California as a producer. We made the space shuttle. We won World War II. We made most of the material that went to Vietnam. We made most of the material that went to the Korean War. We are the manufacturing bed, and if we shift and we lose that leadership, then I think that the state loses its leadership position. I would ask for your aye vote, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you, Senator Rick. Can we call the roll?
V. Manuel Perez.
Aye.
Aye. Logue. Aye. Bell. Aye. Bill Berryhill. Aye. Block. Aye. Salas. 5-0.
Okay, thank you. If we could go ahead and move on to your second bill, Senator.
I appreciate that. Let me thank the witnesses here. What this bill does, Mr. Chair, is it looks at benefits for veterans and small businesses within state contracting. One of the things that we all know is that small business in particular is one of the main drivers of what we need. This bill would, in effect, consistent with what the federal government does, attempt to make California more small business friendly, recognizing the importance of that. We want to get through a situation where we are able to do that. We also want to recognize that we're going to have a lot of veterans coming back, whether it be from Iraq or Afghanistan, where they've been fighting in wars. We're trying to reinstitute, again, that veterans benefit so that some of those guys who risk their lives overseas, when they come back, that California would be in a position to try to assist them in the operation of their small businesses. I have witnesses in support, and thank you for the opportunity to present the bill, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Wright. This bill is SB 1484, Public Contracts, Bundled Contracts, and the anticipated motion is to do pass with amendments to Assembly Appropriations. And yes, sir, if we could have your name, organization, and your support statement.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and the rest of the committee. Again, I'm Aubrey Stone, President and CEO of California Black Chamber. Chambers of Commerce in general do an sundry amount of things throughout the state and their various communities. Being a state organization, obviously our wingspan goes from the north to all the way to the south. But to that end, let's not get it confused. The most important thing and the most important reason as a trade organization that we exist is to create business opportunities. Let's be clear. That's number 1, 2, and 3. To that end, this bundling, if people are not familiar with what it really is strategic sourcing. That is a phrase that was really brought brought into bear by the private sector back in the mid-'90s and adopted by some states that are not progressive in believing that it is cheaper and more cost-effective to do business with large corporations in big numbers rather than breaking up contracts and doing them where people that do $1 million to $5 million can have opportunity to participate in the process. To that end, I'm staunchly against strategic sourcing, i.e. bundling. Aside from the fact that I don't think it's cost effective, but the most obvious reason is that it smacks of the situation that we just got out of or trying to get out of with AIG, Goldman Sachs, etc., where somebody gets to the point where they're too big to fail. In this case, when we bundle and create strategic sourcing opportunities for major firms, they're too big to be accountable. There is absolutely no accountability for the activities that occur with corporations outside of our state, whereby state oversight agencies cannot make them do the right thing and perform in the manner that the original contract dictated they should. Second to that is the fact that it is absolutely no economic impact, plus or minus, to small business in the state of California. I'm looking at Senator Burhill's area down there. We're trying to do a special project, which I'd like to get with him later on in the Central Valley. The issue is opportunities for small business. I listened to the previous commentary talking about job creation. There is no job creation until small businesses in these various regions of the state of California get an opportunity to do business. So what we need to do is come together very, very strategically and not in a partisan manner on this issue of getting small business activities back at the forefront in California so that they can be competitive, so that they can vie for these opportunities. They will create the jobs. So I look forward to working with you, Senator, and the people up in Chico and Northern California, but the Central Valley. It is essential that we give small business opportunity to be competitive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Christian Bartels. I have a small business where I do food distribution. I'm a constituent of Mr. Berryhill here. And what I'd like to do is just reiterate a couple aspects of the bill. This is for goods. And with the unbundling, I believe this bill will just create opportunities to small business to bid, to compete. And that's all we're really asking to do. We believe that we can, and we've seen it in the past, compete, not only compete, but beat small business. And I know there was a concern about the added administration, et cetera, to put these bids out. I've been doing this for 10 years. There's been the same amount of people doing the procurement ever since I've been around. The bundling came about in the last 5 years. When I first got into this business, a bid that I'm aware of, many of the bids that I'm in my area, the food, are now 1 to 2 years long. When I first started, and up until about 5 years ago, those used to be on a quarterly basis with the same amount of people at DGS. I get up every morning, I work really hard to compete, to get our products to service the state of California. I expect the same, hopefully, from the partners at the state of California that I work with every day. And I think together we can work hard, get back on track, save the state a lot of money, create more jobs in businesses like my own that rely on contracts. When I get new contracts, I hire people. That's just cause and effect right there. It's very simple. So what we're looking for in this bill is the ability to compete against large businesses, create smaller bids that we are capable of. We're not, if we bid on a $30 million bid, we can't do it. But we can certainly compete when they're down to $500, $1 million. et cetera. And we can hire more people when we get this competition and get these contracts. Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. Any others here in support of the measure?
Stand here. Good morning, Lori Kammerer, Small Business California. One of the points I wanted to make very quickly is that the unbundling of contracts, this bill only affects goods. It does not deal with construction or IT or services. This is for food, for janitorial, for supplies. These are the contracts that have been historically bundled, or I should say the trend is going toward bundling these contracts. So this is for goods only. There are a tremendous amount of employers who would be able to benefit by being able to bid on these contracts. We're not preventing DGS from bundling contracts. We're just asking, basically saying, we want to open these contracts up.
Thank you. Present your name, organization.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am not in full support right now, so I would like an opportunity to explain if you had, with your indulgence.
Is there anyone else here in support of the measure? Okay.
Michael Shaw at the National Federation of Independent Business, and we're taking a supportive amended position on AB 1484. Obviously, this bill creates a lot of opportunities for small business, and generally I think that small business can beat larger businesses based on price, and that is really what is important to the people of California. Small businesses will create jobs. They're responsible for the vast majority of job creation in general. One concern we have with this bill is, though it's modeled after a federal prohibition on bundling, the federal prohibition includes a provision that allows for bundling when there is a demonstrable cost savings. So if it can be proven by the agency and with under certain conditions, and we would very much appreciate that being very stringent, those stringent conditions, that the cost savings would be there for taxpayers, that this bill I think would be much stronger in both protecting the taxpayer, but also in eliminating a lot of the contracts that today, in the case of Office Depot and others, have been potentially illegitimately awarded based on the fact that there's cost savings where there really was none. So I believe with that condition, we would be supportive of this bill.
Sure. Thank you. Any others?
I didn't mention, Mr. Chair, I want to thank the staff. There are amendments.
Sure.
Item 8 on page 6 having to do with the small business advocate comment on whether or not a bundled contract complies. So I inadvertently did not mention that at the beginning, but those are authors' amendments that I'd like to take and thank the staff for doing that. And I think it moves us closer with where the gentleman was describing about having a review. And again, this does not apply to all contracts, but there would be someone in the governor and the administration that would look at the contract and make sure that there was compliance. So I thought about that after I heard the gentleman speaking. We would try to, again, get closer to that to make sure it's not a blanket situation. But you want to cover the things where there really is no savings, and we can create those synergies for small business to compete in California. So,
well, thanks for bringing that up, Senator Rice. As a matter of fact, I was going to bring that up as well. I understand that you will be taking a couple of amendments, deleting language which prohibits contracting, subcontracting with certified small businesses and disabled veteran business enterprises, part of the 25% small business and 3% DVBE procurement goals. That'd be one. And then adding a 5-year sunset, December 31st, 2016. That'd be your second amendment that you were taking. But the third one, which is addressing your point, would require a third-party review of any proposals for the issuance of solicitations that includes bundled contracts to consider suitability and appropriateness. And I think that gets to the point that you were making earlier.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, looking at this language, and this is for the first time I've seen it. We did have a meeting late last week, but this is the first time I've seen the language, and I believe with this, we would be supportive of the bill.
Sure.
Thank you.
And I understand as well, Senator Wright, there is an amendment at the request of our Republican colleagues to exclude the provisions of this bill to contracts that are let in response to a state of emergency.
That seems reasonable, Mr. Chair. I think we would take that off without objection, sir.
Anybody here in opposition of this measure? Any comments or thoughts, ideas from committee members?
I would just say applaud the author for carrying this bill, and I think this is going to be real great for small business. I had some reservations before these amendments came forward, and I think this cleans it up and really focuses it on what we need to, where we need to have it focused. So I applaud you guys for working with us, and assuming all these are accepted and everything, I'm good with it.
Thank you.
Do I hear, is there a motion on in the committee? Thank you, Mr. Berryhill. First by Mr. Berryhill, second by Vice Chair Mr. Logue. Any other thoughts or comments from committee members? I'd just like to say that I appreciate your advocacy on behalf of small businesses. You're absolutely correct. We need to create the opportunities necessary for you all to survive. And at the end of the day, the way I see this is that we're protecting the little guy. We're creating an opportunity for those folks. And I never heard of the concept of strategic sourcing. You always learn something every single day, so I appreciate the point. Senator Wright, you have a closing?
I'd ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, sir. Can we call the roll?
V. Mayo Perez.
Aye.
Aye. Logue. Aye. Bell. Bill Berryhill. Aye. Block. Aye. Salas. 4-0.
Edges out. Thank you, Senator. We'll see you soon. Mr. Price, Senator Price, thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members.
But we saved the best for last.
Well, another small business bill.
This is SB 1108, Public Contracts, Small Business Participation. And the anticipated motion is the due pass to Business Professions and Consumer Protection. Amendments to be taken in Business Professions and Consumer Protection Committee. So with that being said, Mr. Price, you may present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. SB 1108 authorizes the Department of General Services to direct state departments and agencies to achieve a goal of 25% small business participation in procurement and contracts, and empowers DGS to assist agencies in developing corrective action plans should departments and agencies fail to meet the goal. The bill codifies the governor's executive order S-0206 and ensures that some of the ground small businesses has gained in state procurement and contracting within the past few years will continue in the next administration, regardless of party. Over the past 2 fiscal years, state agencies have met and or exceeded the 25% goal. Codifying the governor's executive order will contribute to the continued success of California small businesses in state procurement and contracting, and support their role as a key driver of job growth and economic development in the state's economic recovery efforts. Small business is expected to play a critical role in our state's recovery effort. However, in the past, very little support has been provided to assist them. We think this is going to be another important tool in that toolbox. I'm pleased to accept the proposed committee amendment, which directs DGS to include and update the small business preference policies in the state contracting manual as well as the state administrative manual. I respectfully ask for your aye vote. I have witnesses in support who are able to speak to this issue, and I would appreciate their comments.
First, do we have a second? Thank you, Senator Price. Those that are in support of the measure like to present? Who'd like to go first? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Mary Griffin, representing the 9 chapters in California with the National Association of Women Business Owners. And I would tell you we are very, very supportive of this measure, and I appreciate what I've listened to, particularly this morning, for small businesses in California. We are the engine that needs to be stroked periodically, so I appreciate, won't take your time, just supportive of this bill.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Good morning once again, Aubrey Stone, President CEO of California Black Chamber, but also in the capacity of being a state commissioner for economic development. I had the privilege of being in the horseshoe when this was presented by the governor, and at that historic signing. In that particular setting, we were kind of on spotlight throughout the country, in that our governor had the courage to step forward and put forth an executive order reflecting a 25% utilization of small business. Again, going to the point of Senator Price, in that it was an executive order, this is, I'd like to refer to it as being on unsolid ground. One, It's only in place until the next governor comes in and takes a look at it and either, thumbs it up, thumbs it down, and then we're back to square zero again. Second is the fact that I'm on the DGS Small Business Committee for the state. And as we look at the numbers across the board in all the various agencies in California, yes, we have reached that goal. But out of the 12 agencies that come under the jurisdiction of DGS, only three out of 12 have reached 25%. The utilization of funds and goods and services in the corrections arena is so high until it's carrying people, to the 25% threshold. That's unacceptable. Just try to imagine for a moment if the other 9, by whatever means, encouragement, training, were brought up to 25%, we'd probably be using close to 40% small business utilization. So I would strongly encourage that we codify this bill so it doesn't no longer become a good thing to do when I feel like doing it or, when I get around to doing it. It becomes a part of the landscape. People understand it's a minimum, and I repeat again, a minimum base requirement that we utilize small and disabled and women-owned businesses so that we can grow California. And all the things we talked about in the previous setting with Senator Wright, this is all reflected back through codifying this bill. So, it's almost like a no-brainer. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, sir. Any others in support of the measure?
Michael Shaw with the National Federation of Independent Business in support.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, Chris McKaylee on behalf of Natoma Technologies, a certified small business headquartered here. They're also a member of the DGS Small Business Council, and you've probably seen some of their procurement work if you looked at election night returns on the Secretary of State website or used e-budget on the Department of Finance website. Thank you,
sir.
Lori Kammerer, Small Business California, in support of the bill. Strong support.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, Christian Bartels, CB Enterprises and Small Business Coalition of California. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others in support of the measure? Any others, anyone here in opposition? Open it up to committee members. Mr. Berrio?
Yeah, just for a little knowledge of the chair, Mr. Bartels is also in an enterprise zone in my hometown. So, once again, proof that they work. Yeah, you know what? The small business, it is what drives California's economy. It is, I believe I've seen stats, it's 95, 98% of our economy are small businesses. Most people think it's all big business. It's not. And every time, and going forward as a legislature, our policies that throw all these different regulations, we have to remember, big business absorbs them. Small business dies by them. And we've got to be careful when we all realize there needs to be regulations, but we've got to be careful we don't overdo it because we're killing the engine that drives California's economy by, in my opinion, going a little too far and a little too fast. So I'm highly supportive of this legislation. We got to keep small business going and chugging away. So,
thank you, Mr. Berrio. Any other comments or points from committee members? Well, thank you for bringing this bill forward, Mr. Price, and I'd like to close.
Yes, I would. Again, just appreciate the work of the committee. And I'd like to piggyback on the comments that Mr. Stone made. While we do have many departments that have met or exceeded that goal, we have many more who haven't. And so an important part of this bill is it gives DGS the authority to develop corrective action plans for those agencies and departments who have not been as successful as we know they could be and should be. And I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator. Let's call the roll.
V. Mayo Perez.
Aye.
Aye. Logue. Aye. Bell. Bill Berryhill. Aye. Block. Aye. Salas. Aye. 5-0.
Senator Price, 5-0. Your bill is out. And we have Senator Liu's bill that's still on call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members.
Thank you, sir. So we're good.
Good job.
Yeah, thank you. Quick. And there's item number 4. hasn't voted?
Hasn't voted.
Okay, so everyone's okay? So we have one bill still on call, and if folks would like to add on, any members, I think, Mary, you might need to add on. Yeah, Marty, are you okay with everything? Okay, good. I'm waiting for Mr. Bell, but did you vote on both of them? You had two of them. Do it on the mic here, Mary, just to make sure. On your mic. You're right, we don't.
She needs to call them, and then.
Mercedes, can you call the bill out, please?
SJR 29, Salas. Aye. Salas, aye. That's 6-0.
And did she miss SB 1084 as well?
She is an aye on
Okay. Good. Okay, you're good. You're good. I'm just waiting on Mr. Bell now. It's a due pass recommendation.
Salas, aye.
Salas, aye on SB 1484. The vote is 5-0.
Okay.
Mr. Bell missing on that one?
I'll see you later, Mayor. We're still waiting on Mr. Bell. I'm going to be sitting down with him, I think, not today, tomorrow. I had to sit down with the speaker, and he supports my position on it. And we'll not, basically, if Steinberg wants him to push it, he's not going to do that. Because he knows all the work that we've done.
Oh, I know.
And so,
we're in the middle of this reform stuff where we can, correct what needs to be corrected.
and then what I'm offering Steinberg is,
Here it is.
There you go. Well, there you see, it's just too many things. Well, that's why it'll unwind you when it happens. That's why it'll unwind you when it happens eventually.